Sometimes I feel like before every video, I should have a disclaimer that says, I like to yap. I'm a yapper. I never shut up. Because people that are new here, they don't understand. I could rant and go on and on about something I'm interested in forever. That's just me though. Anyways.
Sierra loves TV. Yes, I made a theme song so that I can talk about all my favorite shows. Oh yeah. And this is just your disclaimer that this is not me talking about any of the actors themselves, but more so their characters. Please do not attack me in the comments. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, even those who disagree with me. But let's keep it friendly. All right, let's get started with the show.
If you don't remember where we left off, don't worry. I linked the previous part to this video in my description box. So we've got a good bit to cover today. In today's episode of my Gilmore Girls reviews, we're discussing episodes 11 through 16 of season 3. Let's begin. So in episode 11, Emily is being sued for wrongful termination, and honestly, I was as surprised as Lorelai. I discussed the Emily portion of this video in my Emily Gilmore manipulation video. Suki and Jackson's argument kind of reminds me of the argument in The Incredibles. In this episode, Suki and Lorelai take a class about running an inn, and the Francie and Rory beef is still continuing. Francie tricks Rory into meeting her in a parking garage, which later turns into Paris and Rory having a fight. Something I never noticed though was at the end of this episode, you see that Francie ends up getting exactly what she wants. Like now it seems so obvious that that's what they wanted us to see, but like I've never noticed that, and I've rewatched this show like I don't know how many times now. In the beginning of the episode, when they first start off like the whole beef between Rory and Francie, one of Rory's power moves against Francie is that she purposely makes it so that she cannot have the blood drive in the cafeteria, and then at the end of the episode you see her actually having the blood drive in the cafeteria. I love Rory and Lorelai's little food rituals. Suki and Lorelai with the cootie catcher at the little class thing had me crying laughing. I remember people used to make those when I was in elementary school, but I could never figure out how to make one. Suki runs into her old friend from culinary school, and Lorelai starts seeing Charlie from Twilight. Also, one more thing on the whole Paris and Rory thing. Who threw that paper airplane at her at the end? Because Paris is sitting right behind her, and then Francie, you can clearly see her like she's across the way. So who from the opposite direction threw a paper airplane at her that has leper written on it? Who did that? Imagine it was Headmaster Charleston. Okay, that's enough. Or Max Medina. Okay, I'm seriously done, okay. In episode 12, Lorelai and Rory have to clean out Lorelai's garage so Lane and her band can practice in it. I didn't have a Hug-A-World, but I did have that like VTech fly and learn globe as a kid. No idea what happened to it. Taylor is having his ice cream soda shop renovated. This is that weird episode where Zach keeps flirting with Lorelai, and it creeps me out so much. It was cute seeing Rory be protective of Lane though. Lorelai goes to a coffee tasting with Charlie from Twilight, and yes, I'm gonna keep calling him Charlie from Twilight. I cannot see him as anything else. I think it's interesting that while they're having their date, he mentions how old his kids are. If him and Lorelai are the same age, it means he started having kids at like 25, and it feels like another reminder that Lorelai was a teen mom. Charlie invites Lorelai to go fishing. The fishing thing to me is just a little different from the frog thing. It's one of those things that like if Lorelai doesn't say something and they end up staying together, she'd be going fishing frequently in the future. Paris and Rory are still beefing because of another silly reason. All their beef seems so silly and so high school, which is appropriate considering they are literally in high school. Because I agree with Rory, like everyone knew about her and Jamie, like I don't see how they didn't. Later, Paris and Rory are called to the headmaster's office. Paris may be acting insane, but she was reading Il Duce for filth. I feel bad for Rory because she tried to warn Paris about Francie ahead of time, and Paris didn't listen. Then she finds some silly reason to be mad at Rory for something that everybody practically already knew. Like, if she wanted her relationship with Jamie to be that secret, she surely wasn't acting like it. And what is the big secret? I find it hard to believe that Paris couldn't just tell Madeline and Louise to back off with the Trojan man jokes if that was really the only reason that she didn't want people knowing, because when has Paris ever been shy about telling someone how and where they can take it? This episode marks the beginning of Nicole and Luke. Nicole is like another Sherry to me, to be honest. Similar to what I explained in the previous episode of this series, Jess was cracking me up in the diner. Luke offers to teach Lorelai how to fish, and I feel like there's a lot that can be said about the fact that Luke teaches Lorelai how to fish, because we later find out that he knew it was for a date, or it was for a guy that she liked. He knows her well enough to know that she would never fish on her own and she's not an outdoorsy person. He could have been petty and refused to help her learn, but he still did, and he wasn't mean to her while doing it. But I feel like once he realized like, oh, like she's still going on dates, like she's still not with me, she's still not even looking in my direction, he was like, you know what, let me get with Nicole, because I'm not finna be the only Like, this is not happening again, where I watch her be in another relationship and like I'm not getting mine. It always bothered me, like watching this episode, every single time that Charlie tells Rory to go back to sleep. I don't know why that bugs me so bad, but like every single time I watch it, I cannot get over it. Like, it just, I don't know what it is. It just irritates me. This is the unfortunate episode where Lane finds out that she and Dave may never happen because he's not Korean. Mrs. Kim sets Lane up to go to the prom with Youngchu instead. Episode 13 is an episode that I discussed in 2 separate videos on my channel, and because of that, I've decided to add in an additional episode to discuss for today's video, instead of only going up to episode 15. In episode 14, the episode opens up with Emily updating the girls on how Gran has been treating her. Rory finally tells Emily that she and Dean are broken up, which then prompts Emily to manipulate Rory into inviting Jess over for dinner. Lorelai's boyfriend, Suki, and Jackson all go on a double date. One of my favorite things about Rory and Jess is their shared love for books. This is also the episode where Dean and Rory get thrown together, stuck watching Miss Patty's play, and Jess finds out from a flyer. And you're able to see like the massive difference in the reaction. Like, Dean would have blew up. This was another episode that I mostly discussed in my Emily Gilmore manipulation video. In episode 15, Gran is planning to come stay with Richard and Emily. This is the episode where it seems like Rory and Jess begin to like fall apart. Rory spends all night trying to distract herself from Jess, never calling to make plans with her after he said that he would call her later. I admire how even when Rory is trying to talk about how much better Dean was in comparison to Jess, Lorelai didn't join in on ragging on him. She even asked Rory to give Jess a chance to redeem himself and tries to offer Jess some advice on how to make things right with Rory. Rory finds out Dean has a new girlfriend, Lindsay. Dave running all the way down to the game was hilarious to me. Then when Lorelai and Richard were laughing at the end, it made me so happy to see it. I also want everyone to pay attention to how Lorelai starts off trying to defend Emily to Richard. I'm sorry, but like, it's impossible for me not to think immediately, when do we ever see Emily doing that for Lorelai? Almost never is the answer. Never. I can tell Lorelai knows something is wrong with Rory, but I think it's really cool that she doesn't force her to talk about it. She trusts Rory to come to her on her own. And I firmly believe that little moments like that strengthen their relationship even more. Because I'm sure as a parent, she really wants to know like what's wrong with her daughter and what's going on, but she doesn't pry because she understands that the more you push, the more she might pull away. And as for Rory, it's like, that's a tough moment to experience your ex moving on. And while I'm not a Dean and Rory shipper, as we all know, I do empathize with her feelings in that moment, because regardless of how they ended, I just know that it sucks. In episode 16, the last episode we'll be diving into today, Rory and Lorelai are waiting on Rory's acceptance letters. Then Rory enters a speech competition for C-SPAN after Paris basically says she wants one last chance to crush her. I like Brad's character a lot. He seems so sweet. Suki finds out she's pregnant, which, as I mentioned in my video talking about my own pregnancy, this is eerily similar to how I found out that I was pregnant. I also discussed this episode in my downfall of Suki and Jackson video. Lorelai runs into Max at the store and Emily is absent for Friday night dinner. I liked how this episode seemed to start giving Lorelai and Max the closure that their relationship needed, because we never even saw Max's reaction, or we never even saw Lorelai tell Max that it was off. I was thinking, this is so good, you know? Yeah, good for them. Until they kissed. Il Duce puts Paris and Rory together to combine their speeches. Paris forces her way over to Rory's to work on combining their speeches, which to me is clearly an attempt to reconcile with Rory, and so she can talk about her losing her tango card. I have mixed emotions about Lorelai overhearing them talk and saying she's got the good kid. While I understand her fears like as a parent, it's hard to tell why she's saying it, which influences my opinion. It feels like she's saying it because Rory hasn't had that experience, and if that's why, it's not one of my favorite moments from Lorelai. I don't think in contrast, because Paris has had the experience, it makes her a bad kid, or that Rory is better because she hasn't. I think they're young, and while I don't recommend encouraging it, I don't think it has a lot to do with their character or sense of morals, but simply their hormones or how much they feel like they're ready for that experience. Rory just doesn't feel ready, which I think is fine too. Everyone who's watched my Sex and the City videos knows how I feel about tethering the idea of how good of a person someone is to how many people they've tangoed with. One of the biggest parts of like this episode is Paris's meltdown, which pulled a lot of emotions out of me personally. It was emotional, it was slightly humorous, and the energy of it is like just true Gilmore Girls fashion. I think there's something to say about the idea though that female characters in media are sometimes punished in the way Paris was. I get that one of the reasons that they made the character of Paris say that that in that moment is to like add to the shock value, because it's totally out of character for someone in that society period to say something like that. But this is where I began to get some inspiration for my thumbnail. On the other hand, I think Paris having an event where she doesn't win something is good though. I'd even argue that it's important to give her character balance and eliminate this idea that she always wins. I really wanted her to get into Harvard because I know how hard she was working for it and that was her main goal, and I felt bad watching her cry. This moment brought a lot of humanity to Paris, which again is why I feel like it was so important and why they had to do it. For me, this is where Paris stopped being a caricature or almost like a cartoon character, and they shifted her into being more of a real person. Obviously, I think one of the lessons of this was to kind of be like, you don't always get everything you want in life, and sometimes that's okay. But what took the cake at the end was the camera panning and showing Richard sound asleep right at the moment when I was thinking to myself, man, I wonder what Richard is thinking. I wonder how he's reacting to this. The episode ends with Lorelai and Rory finding out Rory has been accepted into multiple schools, including Harvard. For me personally, the Paris meltdown scene, like, it will never not have some huge impact on me because it was totally unexpected. Like, that was the last thing I was expecting when she didn't show up. And they really did a good job at kind of hinting at like that was what was coming, because they kept mentioning the things about like, you know, they're waiting on their acceptance letters. They're telling us that like they're in this period of waiting for their acceptance letters, but the thought that Paris would not get into Harvard when I originally watched this, like it just never occurred to me. And just seeing her like go through all those emotions of like, man, like I've done this thing and like what does this mean for me in the future? Like, did I sacrifice myself? Where does this leave me, like emotionally? I think those are all real feelings, and I love that they added that because it truly feels like it's transforming Paris from being like this egomaniac, which she still is, but it feels like it's kind of moving her away from being like a cartoon character, like I said, into being more real. In the background, I feel like they're also bringing up where Rory stands with the idea of having that experience as well, because she's getting older. I think Gilmore Girls, like the writers, whoever makes the show and like comes up with these ways to just kind of drop things in and like have a slow build up. I think that's one of my favorite things about it, is the slow build up to major events, which is something I feel like today's shows are sorely lacking. Mentally, like I'm stuck in the 2000s and everything before then. But that's one of the things I feel like has my heart and soul when it comes to like older television, is that things moved a lot slower, and I feel like it gave you time to really connect with the characters. It's an important lesson to learn. Like, some things simply just don't work out, but that doesn't always have to be a bad thing. That doesn't always have to be the end of you as a person. I feel like you take it one step at a time. You start off and it's really traumatic, and you know, this thing that you thought was totally gonna work out in one way doesn't. You know, you have that moment where it's like this traumatic feeling of like, I really kind of put all my eggs in one basket, or I really was like betting so much on this working out for me. But I feel like there's a quote that says, and I know I'm always like showing you guys the quotes and whatnot, but there's a quote I think that says something along the lines of, you've survived before, you can survive this, or something like that. I want to say that I've posted it before, but I try to carry that with me a lot of the times, and it's not easy. Like, I'm not saying that like, oh, because this one quote has prevented me from ever getting sad about things not working out. But I feel like one of the main things that helps people heal and move on and pick themselves up to see another day is like changing their mindset and trying to look at things from a different perspective. I hope that helps you guys. I don't know. But I just want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in for another episode segment. I don't even know what I'm calling this anymore, but thank you so much for watching, and I hope everyone's doing well. I hope that watching this helped you guys kind of take a break from the earth, because it's just so much going on and it's so stressful. I'm wishing everyone that comes across this video well, and I will see you guys in the next one.